disruptive events, these major, call it crisis or whatever, or now paradigm shifts in technology, like now with cloud computing. These are events which help us, I think, even further accelerate, adoption of open source, which overall is good for Red Hat.
It gets people out of their comfort zone.
Exactly,
Because they have to.
Because they have to. That's exactly the point. But because nobody has to switch from, let's say, Solaris to Linux, why should they do it? It's just hassle. It's just a potential risk. Human beings, they are at bottom line, they are lazy and don't want to, take the other risk. Okay, but if they're forced to.
But you were asking about challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
The challenges that we're facing selling it. It's also getting the potential customers to understand the business model, because it's so different, and also the difference between what's community and what's enterprise. Because there's still, at some customer, a perception that they don't understand what the difference is between community and enterprise.
And then still the case is, unfortunately, that the big guys have so much still, in certain areas, power of locking in the customer, and they have so much leverage of saying, okay, and a little bit subsidizing this area to keep whatever Red Hat out, but nobody's giving anything away for free and charging even more somewhere else. Okay, and that's but customers, at least they start to realize this. When you think of
because the role of the government is different as in the US, right? If we have here like Nelly Smith-Cruz or Nelly Cruz,
she's doing us some favors. It's good.
Yeah, she does. Really, she takes a real public stand promoting open source, and therefore governments do the same thing. I don't know whether it's the same as in the US, but this is very much stimulated by subsidizing situations like the government does subsidize our economies. But how do you get friends to these situations? How does that work?
I'd say the key thing is, first of all, we're working, actually we have community people, we have evangelists, we have, I don't want to call them lobbying people, but, people working exactly, with Nelly and, the whole team in Brussels and so on, and doing the appropriate work. But still now you have more and more governments who have an open source policy in clear statements, but sometimes in Germany say, Papier ist geduldig, paper is patient, So the key thing now is, how can we ensure that now these very nicely, perfectly written down policies are actually also lived by and are implemented? That's the big challenge, okay? Because the Dutch government, from a policy perspective, is probably one of the strongest in all of Europe, or maybe all of the around the whole world. And I think they have done there some good steps, but still there is a lot of stuff where it's they're not following the policy.
Okay? I'm missing one marketing argument in this lot. I know that bloatware consumes more energy than leanware.
Yes.
Okay, you were talking performance, which comes on top of that phenomenon. Isn't it wise to emphasize that more, that using lean open systems can save the world half their energy?
It's a tactical mechanism we should take. We have a huge set of messages, same workloads running on Windows versus Linux. The server itself uses less power. Right. Certainly when you start looking across servers, when you need fewer numbers of servers.
Performance and energy use is something that you really can turn into figures. You can put a workload on this machine, you can put the same workload on that machine. And at the end, at the back of the server, you measure. And that gives a figure. That's easy to understand, but I missed that in the whole discussion.
It's a good point.
It's a good point. We have good stats on that.
Actually, AOL, when they moved massively away from Unix to Red Hat Enterprise Linux and on x86, which was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, so already a long time customer, the complete project, including everything, was solely paid by the savings in the power bill. Because there was like, again, AOL had their, I don't know, 10, 20,000, or 30,000 servers, they consume some energy. If you get there, whatever, I don't know what now the percentage was, 30% energy savings, I'm not sure what now the kilowatt costs in, the US, but it was huge. It was millions just in power savings, which actually for them financed the whole
We actually, our tactical marketing message, we talk quite a bit about green IT, because it's exactly, it's a very good.
Good.
We have to start wrapping up, maybe.
Maybe one question?
One more question.
Here in Holland we have a law that says that open source software is preferred software. When local communities are switching, they have to look at open source. Still, that doesn't bring very much. how could that be? How can it be that Red Hat and the other vendors are not having profit of these laws?
Well, let me talk about it in general, and I don't know if you want to talk about it specifically here in Holland. I mean, one of the big problems that we're finding is that inertia is a powerful force, and so it's easy to write RFPs of, you know, I'll consider open source this and that, but it's got to be called Excel, right? Or right. So RFPs can be written to lock in, and you know. Not that people are necessarily trying to do that, but people are used to what they're used to, and if they're used to certain features of, you know, an existing piece of software, it's easy to write an RFP that kind of forces that.
Yeah.
And so we see that around the world.
And then what I just said, you know, there's many good policies out there written to please certain people, but still doesn't mean that they automatically get implemented, because still our big competitors, they have just thousands of people, and they have an army of lobbyists, you know, who just, you know, schmooze and, you know, wine and dine, you know, at the appropriate levels, you know, which, let's say, we, for example, just cannot afford. And that's still the reason why you still have a relatively slow adoption, even though you already have a, you know, even a law supporting it. Like I said, this is exactly one of the challenges we have. And like we're fighting with the big guys. You know, in terms of this specific cases where Microsoft is always the big kind of, you know, enemy, and they have. So look at their departments, how many people they have just in the lobbying kind of category. You know, it's probably more than we have people in total at Red Hat.
So in the end, the real hurdle is an ignorant crowd of decision makers.
To a certain extent, yes, and to a certain extent also because there's not a disruptive event which forces the change, okay, or not disruptive enough. Like I said, we're making progress, but it's just, you know, it's in small steps. And it's
or disruptions are just not documented. For example.
Well, no, but I think it's an extreme to say ignorant, because I do think if you look at in a short term, right? Mm-hmm. So I am in charge of this budget for this year, and I can say I can stick with what I have, or I can change. Even if over a 5-year period the change is dramatically cheaper, often if you are looking at a single year, it's more expensive to change anything, right? I got to retrain my people who know one thing. I need to reinstall this new stuff and the services and everything around that. Whenever you look at a short enough period of time, change is always expensive, right? And so I think a lot of what we see, and we see this with other enterprise customers, you're like, look, how much does this cost you over 5 years? Like, yeah, but I got to make my budget this year. And that's particularly extreme in government.
So what would help is if governments are forced to make the calculations over 10 years.
Yes. Yes.
And also forced to include exit costs.
And you can guarantee the cost over those 10 years.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Good. We have some sandwiches?
Yes. There's one.
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.